So I'm Nick Wise. I'm the CEO and founder of Ocean Mind and a co-founder of Climate Trace. Did you know that the energy trapped by man-made global warming pollution is now equivalent to exploding 600,000 Hiroshima-class nuclear bombs every day, 365 days per year? The impact of global warming on humanity is clear and present. A recent study suggested that the global death toll from just heat and cold changes attributed to climate change is around 5 million deaths per year. By contrast, the total death toll from the COVID-19 pandemic was 7 million cumulative. The cost of climate change is catastrophic and is only getting worse. And the ocean, which is the life support system for our planet, and the driving force behind all of the major planetary systems that we rely on to survive, has taken the brunt of the impact. The insurance industry reports that the number of worldwide extreme weather catastrophes have increased 5-fold over the past 40 years, costing the global economy $2.5 trillion in the period 2011 to 2020. This will be much more in the coming decade. Global warming is now the #1 threat to the global economy. But there is hope. Once we hit net zero, temperatures will stop increasing within 5 years. And if we stay at net zero, half of human-caused CO2 will fall out of the atmosphere within 30 years. So, we are not yet on track to achieve net zero. Emissions are continuing to increase year on year. So who needs to do what to get there? Well, often the finger points at governments for not doing enough fast enough. But almost all emissions come from business. We, right here, right now, have the power to drive rapid change needed to get back on track. But how? Well, and why? Well, that $2.5 trillion of cost I mentioned fell on business. And the cost of doing business in the future will overwhelmingly be driven by climate risks if we do not act now. In fact, if we don't act now, many businesses will not survive to see net zero. We have to act to protect the future profits. So as to how, let's see. Climate Trace is the largest inventory of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions on the planet, with significant emission sites from around the world. Instead of asking organizations how much they emit, we look directly through observations and remote sensing, which allows us to have an independent look at facilities. We can look at any facility on the planet in an open and transparent fashion. Using satellites, remote sensing, big data, and AI, we can create emissions estimates for any source. Take, for example, the Gary Works steel plant in Indiana, in the USA. Satellite images capture infrared heat output at the plant, as well as looking at the outputs from smokestacks and fans on the facility. These are then put into computer algorithms which create estimates for the emissions from the facility at any point in time. Similar techniques can be applied to other sectors, such as power plants or refineries. Similarly, for shipping, GPS tracking data for ships is commercially available, and they show where they go and how fast they go. Satellite images and satellite radar cross-reference GPS information to locate ships. From these ship movements, we've created algorithms that estimate the emissions for different types of activity, such as fast steaming or slow maneuvering, or when in port. We applied similar techniques across all 20 sectors. So former Vice President Al Gore was able to launch the first global database of over 70,000 of the largest unique sources of emissions at COP27 last year. Here we see the Climate Trace website, where you can zoom in on any of these facilities. For example, the Permian Basin in Texas is the #1 emitting asset on the planet. But you can look at other facilities. You can see how they compare to each other. You can see how, for example, agriculture compares to oil and gas. We have data for the past 6 years for almost every emitting site in the world. The map and the data are free and open to anyone, anywhere, and they provide the first truly global and comprehensive view of emissions. You can immediately review, filter, sort, compare data sets, and you can download all of the data in full to use in your own tools for your own analysis. You can download our methodology documents to see how we created all of this data, and you can understand the accuracy and applicability of each data set for your use. So what have we found in the data? Well, many interesting things. For example, the top 14 largest sources of emissions in the world are all oil and gas fields, if you exclude forestry. In 2021, the actual emissions from oil and gas production were between 2 and 3 times higher than countries reported to the United Nations. Also, the top 500 sources of emissions globally emit more than the whole of the United States put together, and more than half of those are power plants. Climate Trace provides you with data to get actionable insights, through which we hope to trigger a race to the top by demonstrating the fact that there are facilities with excess capacity that have less emissions per tonne of production. There is no intrinsic cost to transferring production from high-emitting facilities to low-emitting facilities in this case. We can also help identify new operating model trade-offs to reduce emissions rapidly, for example, in shipping. Ships produce less emissions if they travel more slowly. So if shippers are willing to receive their goods a little slower, they can benefit from significant emissions reductions. Data puts new solutions on the table that can be win-win. Rapid emissions reduction with no new infrastructure can be done today. So we think there are some important benefits of using Climate Trace to inform your decision-making. For governments, it can help with designing policy and investment to meet net zero obligations. For corporates pursuing net zero commitments, it can show scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions in their supply chains and provide options to switch to lower emitting suppliers. And for investors pursuing net zero portfolios, we can show how this can be achieved and how progress can be measured. A global database of the largest emitters and who owns them helps investors get the job done. It becomes easy to verify the progress made by companies in your portfolio. So, here's my challenge to you. Visit climatetrace.org. Explore the emissions and download the data. See what you can learn about yours or your client's supply chains. Revisit your net zero strategy. With better data, can you get there faster? What is slowing you down? Get in touch with us. We can help with working with the data, with applying it to unique circumstances and providing access to deeper or finer grained workings if needed. Our mission is to reduce emissions faster. Join us and come and see us on stand C52. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for the presentation. One question there.
Thank you very much. What percentage of total estimated emissions do you believe that Climate Trace actually has and in the database? And do you complement that with estimates for what you don't directly measure?
So the actual number changes regularly. So I can't remember what the total is right now, but it is on the website, what we're currently producing. We provide full transparency on what we do use and where we're filling in gaps with other data. The idea is that it's a one-stop shop for all emission sources. So where we don't directly have data, we're partnering with other organizations to pull data through. And the point is that it's all being made freely available and open so that anyone can use it for any purpose.
One question there.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I don't have an in-depth understanding of how the remote sensing and all of that stuff works, but I saw you could get emissions from individual power plants and things like that. And I'm wondering, how granular can you go? Can this extend to like someone's house, or, I'm just curious.
So at the moment, I don't think we're going to that level of detail, but what we do is neighbourhoods. So we'll look at sort of the higher level likely output on average from an area. Primarily, it's looking at sort of the larger scale, so cities and city blocks, or infrastructure, buildings associated with industry. But eventually, it will be able to get more and more granular.
One question over here.
Thanks very much for a fantastic presentation. I just wonder, since you have a different figure in relation to what's reported or what you have estimated, how do you validate your data? So how confident that you are really the boss of all the data that's around?
So a lot of our data has been put through peer review. We've partnered with a wide range of organizations and universities, primarily in the US. All of this information is publicly available through the website, including all of the detailed methodologies. So you can reverse engineer what we've done and look at it yourself. We're very clear on how accurate we think we are. And so where we've published things where we believe that there is, for example, 2 to 3 times more emissions, we have explained why in the underlying information that we've published. And so we do believe that we're observing things that are not being included in the reported emissions, largely because they don't have to be. And so there are gaps in the regulations.
So is it feasible that if we, you said you're going to land to a neighborhood, I presume a super lower output area of a city. Is that what you're saying? You're going to a neighborhood?
I think that's right.
Okay.
I'm not doing buildings, so I'd have to refer back to one of my colleagues to be sure.
Okay, so if you are supplied with that data for those neighborhoods, and I think the government published that, would you be able to train your technology to actually do that and validate your data on that?
I believe the answer is yes. I'm going to say yes, and then put the challenge to my colleagues who are working in buildings.
We have time for one last question. Otherwise, we can also wrap it up. Beautiful. No, one question, I'm sorry.
What is the extent of the reporting? Is it mostly scope 1 and scope 2, or is scope 3 included?
We are looking at every emitting source on the planet. So scope 1, 2, and 3 is from a point of view of someone. So if you take the point of view, then you can look at the facilities that are yours, that's your scope 1, look at the power generation around you that feeds you, which is your scope 2, and then you can look for all the facilities that are in your supply chain, your scope 3. So for every individual organization, it's different, but all the data is there for you to do everything down to scope 3.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation again. Thank you for your attendance. We're going to have... Yes.
Thank you.